All right, so we are going to continue from where we left off the last time. So we are going to be looking at closures. What is a closure? A closure is a function that remembers and uses variables from its surrounding scope, even after that scope is gone. All right, so first of all, let me explain scope. All right, so we have the main function, all right, and then we have another function, void add. All right, so this is an addition function. All right, and inside this addition function we have two integers. All right, 2 and 3. Okay, so we also have this let me call this function addition, and then I'll create another variable and call it add, which is going to be a plus b. All right, so right now I have two integers which I am adding, and yeah, this is it. I'm printing the result. So this function has a scope, all right, and so does the main function. Every function has a scope. Okay, and then the scope is kind of like the jurisdiction of that function. The scope is simply the opening of these curly brackets of this function, from the opening of this curly brackets to the closing of this curly brackets. So everything inside this function, everything inside this area is within the scope of this function. Okay, same thing with the main. Everything from this opening curly brackets to the closing is within the scope of the main function. So now I can only access this variable because these two variables, in fact even this third one, because these three variables are within the scope of a particular function, this particular function, right? They can only be accessed inside of this function. I cannot access a here, all right, or print. I cannot access any of these inside of here, inside of this place. All right, so but what can I do to make it? Well, same thing. If I happen to declare another variable here, okay, it's going to be the same thing. I won't be able to access it inside addition. All right, so this function doesn't know what this is. Okay, same here. This main function doesn't know what this is, doesn't know what this is. Okay, so how do I make a variable to be global? Right, because right now these are local variables. They are called local variables, right, because they are private to certain functions. Okay, like this one is private to this function, these ones are private to this function, so we call them local variables. So how do we make them global? By bringing them outside of any function, right, and just bring them out, right, outside of the functions, and now they can all be accessed by this, by the functions that are making use of them. All right, they can be accessed anywhere in this code, in this file. All right, so these are now global variables. They are no longer local. Okay, so that's it. So coming back to closures, It says a closure is a function that remembers and uses variables from its surrounding scope even after the scope is gone. So we have an example right here, and here this function, right, this is a function that has a counter. I would like to call this void. Okay, we are actually returning a function, an anonymous function, right? So yeah, this will have to be of the return type of this function will have to be function, because this type function is the super class, the super type of all functions in that. Okay, so whenever you have a function in that, this is the super type function. All right, so now we have count, and then we are returning an anonymous function that is increasing count and printing it. All right, so closures are basically functions that closures return anonymous functions. All right, so just as this anonymous function is being returned from this function. Okay, so whenever I call this, if I call it the first time, int count counter. Okay, because an anonymous function is being returned, right, the value of this is actually an anonymous function. Okay, so I will have to store it in a variable, right, and then call that variable. Yes, so that's the way it is. Now the first time I called it, this this count variable is increased, it is incremented, okay, and printed. All right, so the value is 1. It has gone from 0 to 1. So the first time I called it, all right, 1 is being returned from this function, so 1 is being printed. I'm going to call it again, and when I call it again, I'm getting 2. Okay, 2 is being printed. Why? Because the previous value of this count variable was stored, right? This function is a closure, all right? And remember what we said about closures. They remember and use variables from their surrounding scope. So this variable within the scope of this function is being remembered. All right, so it remembers that this second time I called it, it remembers that previously this count variable was incremented. All right, so the new value is 2. If I call it again, I'm going to have 3. All right, so I have 1, 2, 3. All right, so that is it about closures. Okay, it's a function that returns an anonymous function which remembers and uses the value of variables within its scope, and I can actually declare this to be function instead of dynamic. Alright, so now let's look at another concept known as callbacks or callback functions. Okay, callback functions and higher order functions. Okay, so what is a callback? A callback function is a function that is passed as a parameter of another function. Okay, a function that is passed as a parameter of another function. Let me think of an example. An example of callback functions. Okay, give me an example of that. Let me see. Okay, so let me take this simple example and explain it. All right, so this function, right, process user data, is taking a function as parameter. All right, and this function, this particular function, is being used in this function. It is being called. All right, so that's when the parent function is called, or the higher order function. All right, when the higher order function, which is process user data, is called, the callback will be executed also. Okay, so I'm going to do away with this. So this is this is simply how it works. All right, so if I call process user data, I'm going to have a string user ID, and let me call this Alice, and a callback. What is this callback going to be? Okay, so I'm just going to pass in an anonymous function here. Can't be assigned today. All right. Let me see what I get out of this. All right, so this is how callbacks simply works. Okay, this is the callback. All right, this is the callback, and the function that makes use of the callback is the higher order function. Okay, so a callback is simply a function that is passed as a parameter of another function. All right, so that is what a callback function is, and this is it. And the function that makes use of the callback is called the higher order function, so that when the higher order function is called, the callback is also executed. Okay, so I believe we are done with everything that we have to cover in functions for this course. All right, so next we'll be going into object-oriented programming. All right, so that is the next module that we are going to be going into after this. So thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next chapter.